Hey fellow backyard boyers, Nick here. Tonight I'm going to be building myself an arm guard. Now, I've been getting a lot of questions on arm guards and how to build them, how to use them, and so I figured finally I'd kind of get around to it, and as a sort of intro I'll just show you guys how I build an arm guard. Now this style of arm guard is going to be pretty much the same as this one. This is my favorite style of arm guard. It's very simple. It has two buttons and elastic bands. The way it works, you put it on your arm, you bring the elastic bands around to the button on the opposite side, and there you go. It's nice, it's secure, but you can move it around, you can adjust it, it's easy to take on and off. It's one of my favorite styles of arm guards when I do use an arm guard. Now this one is going to be fairly straightforward. I'm going to have a little bit of an inlay or a strike pad for the string right in here, kind of where this is. The design's going to be a little different, but the overall shape is going to be the same. Alright, so first we're going to start off with the leather for this. I'm using about 5 to 6 ounce oil tan leather. This is fairly thin. I put it together. It's, good amount of thickness. I don't like really thick or rigid arm guards. On the same note, if your arm guard is too thin, you're gonna run into the same problems as if you were to not have an arm guard altogether, as far as the string getting hung up and all of those things. So you want kind of a middle ground. I like using oil tan because it's really supple. It gives. It doesn't scuff up too easily. But I also like using vegetable tan leather. That works too. And I've also got a piece of embossed leather, sort of in a gator skin pattern. This is going to be for our inlay. So I've gone ahead and I've already put my pattern on here. So you can see it's just a really simple shape. This is going to be the interior. I'm actually just going to use the suede side as the interior. And then here I've got sort of the middle layer where everything's going to attach to. So I've got my section here where the inlay is going to be cut out, or the inlay is going to be put. We're going to be cutting this section out. And where this quiver used antler buttons, I'm going to be using these Flying Eagle quarter conchos that I picked up from Tandy Leather. So there it is. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut out both of these pieces, kind of just dry fit them together, and then I'm going to start cutting out my inlay and figuring all that out. So some of the other tools I have is I have a little punch here. This is what I'm going to be using to punch my holes. And I've got a little marker here so that when I do my seam along the outside and along the inlay portion, I have a nice consistent, I have a nice consistent pattern, so my holes are evenly spaced. And this is basically 5 points per inch. So there's that. So I'm just going to be using a pair of scissors to cut these out. Now that my pieces are cut out, you can see they pretty much match. If I put them together, they fit pretty well. Now we'll true up these edges once we have this all glued, but at this point I could just go ahead and glue this and punch some holes, and this would be ready to go. So if you wanted to go this route with a very simple pattern, you could do this. If you wanted just a really simple arm guard like this, you could also just skip and get a solid piece of I'd say about a 10 to 12 ounce leather. And that would work really well on its own. But for doing the inlay, I'm going to start by actually cutting my pattern out. You see I have two lines because I just sort of free-handed this pattern. Sort of a teardrop shape, almost like a point or a blade. I shortened it a little bit because I want some space, about an inch from either end. So I'm just going to take a razor blade, really simple, and just cut this shape out. So. Okay, so here it is. I'm going to go ahead and pop that out. So this is what our cutout's going to look like. Now I just sort of free-handed this. Now this arm guard isn't symmetrical. If you wanted to make it symmetrical, you'd want to measure everything out. You can see it's kind of off to one side, but I kind of like it that way. So you've got this piece here that fits right in here. Now what I like to do is just trim the edges on this just a little bit. You want to take about 1/8 of an inch off all the way around. So now you can place this in, and there's a little bit of space around this piece here. You can see there's just a little bit of space. What we're going to do is when we lay this here and we line them up, it'll actually sort of push our inlay out just slightly so that it has some body or substance to it underneath. So now that I've got this, I usually just go ahead, figure out what part of this pattern I want on here, and then just trace it out. Once I've traced it out, I usually give myself about 1/4 to 1/2 an inch all the way around, and I just cut this out. There it is. So as you can see, that's the way that lines up. And then this will go right over that. So now that I've got that, I want to go ahead and set up my lines for my stitching. So the first thing I do is I actually draw a line about 1/4 inch from the edge. This is going to get hidden, so it's not that big of a deal. I usually go right onto the leather. Now there are tools for doing this, but I usually just do it by hand and by eye. As you guys know by now, I like to do a lot of things by hand and by eye. So I'm not sure if you can see, but I've got my line drawn. Now I just take this tool, start from one side, and then just go gently and follow my line. And there we go. So as you can see, I've got that marked. So the next thing I'm going to do is punch that out. So I'm going to go ahead, punch that out. I'll show you what that looks like. Oops. Both sides are now dry. So I'm just going to take this and put them together. Just got to go from the inside and the outside and make sure that everything lines up. That I don't have it. That I have it nice and centered on both sides. You just press both sides together so that it gets a nice bond. And there we go. And now, take our little piece here, and you can kind of press it in. You can see how it's going to come out. So now what I'm going to be doing is actually sewing this and this together. I'm just going to be using a blunt needle, because the blunt needle will actually go through this thinner leather fairly easily. As you can see, goes through the thinner leather fairly easily. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew this up. I'm going to be using some artificial sinew. Alright, now that I've got this done, I'm going to go ahead and prep this surface to glue. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply some glue on this side, and then let them dry. So there we go. We're basically putting the cutout back in. Okay. Now that that's drying, I'm just going to go ahead and punch my holes. Now these holes are going to get bigger later, but for right now, we'll punch them with this small punch so that we have something of a reference. So that when we have to punch through the full thickness, we have a guide. Okay. now that I've done that, while this is all drying, I'm going to go ahead and put my contros on. These are screw back, so it's really simple. Just take the screw post, push it through the hole. Okay, there we go. And I just want to screw this down. As tight as possible. There we go. So there's one. I'm just going to do the other. And I'm doing this on the inside here through just one layer of leather. That way, when this backing goes on, you can see we won't have the post digging into our I won't have the post digging into my arm. Alright, so there's that. Now I just gotta let this inside dry. Once that's dried, then we can go ahead and glue this to this. So, there we go. Now that they're dry, I'm just gonna take both sides, make sure I line it up right. You want to line it up right into the recess so that when we put the backer on, it'll actually push the embossed leather up. So our inlay will actually stick out a little bit. You can actually see that starting to happen on this side. There we go. So now I'm just going to go ahead and put glue on, put glue on both sides here, completely cover them. Then I'm going to glue them together when that's dry. So here we go. Now that both sides are dry, I just take them and put them together. Pretty straightforward. Just trying to line this up as best as I can. Make sure it's all matched. So there you go, you can see it matches up. I'll just move this out of the way. And then you just want to press down on this, get everything, get a good contact. So now I'm just going to let this completely dry, completely cure. So now that I've let it dry, here it is. It's nice and it's held together now. What I'm going to do is clean up the edges. So I'm just going to unscrew these so I have access to the rest of this. So looking at the edges, it's all clean. There's actually no large spots where the edges don't match, which is good. So I'm just going to take a piece of sandpaper. This is 100 grit. I'm just going to sort of round and bevel the edges slightly, just so it has a nice finished appearance. The thing I like about oil tan leather is that once you've beveled this, you just apply some kind of oil or like paste wax, and it Makes it look really nice on the edges. I've gone ahead, cleaned up all the edges, so it's nice and rounded. Now what I'm going to do is set up my stitching on the edges. So I'm just going to really simply just figure out how far away from the edge I want. What you want to do is go up to where the screw posts are and figure out where the actual screw post is, because you're going to have to stitch just outside of that. So looking at almost a 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to use my finger and just scribe a line following the contours all the way around. So you can see I've gone ahead. You can see my line. It's kind of faint, but I have my line running all the way around now. Once you've done that, I just want to go and take this marker here. Start from the middle, and I just want to follow this line all the way around, so I know where to put my holes. There we go. You can see I've gone all the way around. Now I'm just going to take my punch out all my holes. Once I've done that, then I'll go ahead and just stitch this. I'm just going to be doing a saddle stitch. Really simple, really secure. And kind of important for something like this, because if one of these threads gets worn down, the whole thing won't just unravel. So all my holes are punched. Now I'm just going to start sewing. So I'm just going to start on one side where there's not much. I'm going to start on one side where there's not much going on. So this won't really be in a spot where it'll get worn down very easily. So I'll take the one that's going up, bring it down. You could do a saddle stitch here, which is what I'm doing. I'm just going to be going back and forth between both sides with 2 needles. So that's the saddle stitch. You could also do a whip stitch, which is basically where you go around like this. I find that you tend to get a lot of edge wear, but it's a really nice look. So if you want to go that route, go for it. It also gives you a nice, more rounded edge here. But I'm just going to do it this way. So I'm just going to keep going, and I'll show you what that looks like when I'm done. Alright, now the outside is all stitched. What I did was I brought them in, pulled them, then I took my one side that was out here on this side, and I brought it through to the other side. So now they're both on the inside. I like to take a little bit of just any kind of super glue. Just put a dab of super glue and kind of squish some into the hole there. Kind of rub it down and take the razor blade and cut the loose ends free. There we go. That's all done. I'll go ahead and I'll put these back. That's one thing I like about using the conchos with the screw posts, you can reposition them, you can switch them out. The reason why I put them on the inside is just so that the back of the post doesn't rub against my arm. This becomes sort of like a built-in lining. You could also use lining leather as well, especially if you were just using one larger piece, like a 10 or 12 ounce leather. Alright, let's just tighten that up real quick. There we go. So here's the main body of the arm guard finished. Now all there is left to do is sort of break it in. And we're going to be putting our elastic bands in. But you can see that's how it looks so far. But there it is. I'm just going to prep the holes for the elastic bands. You can see I already have the starters lined up that we did earlier. I'm just going to take this on my drill press. I'm just going to drill a larger hole. That way, I like drilling holes for this because I find that the built-up heat actually makes this a little sturdier because the elastic band is constantly going to be moving. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll show you what that looks like. I've got the holes for my elastic bands drilled in. Now I'm going to be using elastic. You could just use a rigid or non-elastic cord and leave it, say, long at the ends so that you can loop the longer cord over each button and then actually pull the back tight and tie it to secure it. That's one way you could go. I'm going to be using an elastic band. Now, normally I'll use about 1/8 inch elastic. This is easier to come by and I usually use it. It works great, but I wanted something a little more robust, so I'm going to be using 3/16 on this one. And I went ahead and drilled 1/4 inch holes on this. Normally I'll use 3/16 holes with 1/8 inch elastic. So what I like to do is start by going from the outside. So I start from the outside, go in, then I bring that through, and then I go from the inside out, like that. Then I'll tie a knot on this end. Try to put the knot as close to the end as I can. Pull that in. And then I like to make it so that my loop, so I'll go ahead and I'll actually put this on and see what's a good amount of tension here. So usually I like to have it so that it creates a C shape that doesn't quite get to the other side. It gets about 1 inch away from the other side. Once you get your length, I'm going to go ahead and tie a knot on the other side. Just like you did on that first part, you just want that knot as tight and as close down as you can to that way. So then I go ahead and I just test fit it, bring this around. And if I feel like it's So I think that's a sufficient amount of tension there. That'll be good. We'll take that off. Pull it tight and trim it. Do the same thing on the other side. Except now I have something to go by, and I know how long I want to make it. There we go. And I usually end up using about a little less than a yard of cord per arm guard. So just want to go ahead and shorten all the ends, and then I take a little bit of super glue and just put it on the ends here just to keep them from fraying, to keep everything together. There it is. The completed arm guard. Alright, and here it is. So there's our finished arm guard. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. So now I've got something to use that's a little more updated. I think it looks a little better. It fits good. Feels good. So, there it is. Well, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.